Hello, joyful creators, and welcome to Once Upon a Storybook. My name is Cynthia with Cynthia's Joyful Creations, and we have been reading angel stories from the book In the Arms of Angels by Joan Wester Anderson. And today's angel story is titled Stranger on the Train. The angels regard our safety, undertake our defense, direct our ways, and exercise a constant solitude that no evil befalls us. John Calvin. It had been an exhilarating experience. Pastor Cecilio Bermudez mused as the Atlanta communicator train bounced its way along. Imagine! More than 40,000 clergy of all denominations from all parts of the country together on Valentine's Day weekend for the first Promise Keepers Clergy Conference in history. And he was a part of it. Not wanting to miss a single moment of praise or worship or any of the presentations, Cecilio and his 3 companions had gone all day without even taking time to eat. Now their stomachs were starting to growl, and they hoped to be back at their motel and in its restaurant very soon. All 4 of the pastors were from the Southwest, but Cecilio was the only Hispanic, and he barely spoke English. At his First Baptist Church in Los Fresno, Texas, he served primarily Spanish-speaking Americans. He was a gentle and humble man who had never been this far from the security of home. Cecilio was feeling rather vulnerable, especially because the train was crowded and the 4 men were not sitting together. Cecilio kept George, a fellow pastor who was sitting ahead of him, in constant view. When George got up to exit, Cecilio would too. In the meantime, his thoughts drifted to his wife. Had she discovered the Valentine that he had left for her? His grown son who lived nearby and his beloved parishioners? How thrilled he would be to get back to familiar surroundings and tell them about this stirring rally. All seats were taken now, and passengers were swaying in the aisle as the train rumbled on. Suddenly, a large man blocked Cecilio's glimpse of George. The train slid to a stop. The doors opened and then closed again before Cecilio could get a clearer view. Where was George? Still in his seat? And the other 2 pastors? Cecilio attempted to see around the crowd. Another stop and doors slid open again. Some laughing travelers boarded, one carrying a Valentine balloon bouquet that made it even more difficult to see. There was a break in the crowd, and Cecilio craned his neck to catch sight of George. But George wasn't there. None of his companions appeared to be on the train. The crowd closed up again, and Cecilio began to panic. His friends must have left the train, assuming that he was just behind them. The doors opened and shut again. He was lost in a strange city more than 1,000 miles from home. He didn't speak much English, and he had forgotten the name and address of his motel. Cecilio prayed, "Lord, please help me." It was the only prayer he could think to say. He sat silently as the train continued its journey, stopping and starting, the crowd thinning, his friends farther and farther behind. What would he do? How could he make himself understood, if he could even find a friendly face? When the train stopped again, Cecilio felt an inner nudge. Get off here. Obediently, he exited and sat cold and hungry on a concrete bench. Was God going to send him more directions? Not at first, but gradually Cecilio noticed that at the station, trains ran on 3 above-ground levels. He felt certain he was to go to the ground level tracks, and again he obeyed. When a train came, he boarded. The train was almost deserted. As Cecilio selected a seat and sat down, he noticed 2 large men wearing soiled work clothes and talking loudly. Weaving and leering, they were obviously drunk. They stumbled down the aisle to the seat exactly across from Cecilio. Both sat down and stared at him strangely. They were going to mug him, Cecilio realized. Given his small stature, he would be no match for them. He prayed even harder. A tall, slender, white-haired gentleman sitting several rows behind was apparently aware of the situation. "Are you lost?" he asked Cecilio. "Yes," Cecilio replied, turning. The man moved a little bit closer and smiled reassuringly. "Don't worry about it. I'll take you where you need to go." He hadn't asked where Cecilio needed to go. He hadn't asked any other questions. Despite the large drunken men, Cecilio suddenly felt safe, even comforted. "Thank you," he answered. The train went on, stopping several times. The intoxicated men apparently abandoned any criminal plans and eventually exited. Finally, when Cecilio had almost decided he would sleep on the train, the older man rose. "We'll get off here," he said. "Follow me." Cecilio followed him and noticed that they were near the airport. Yes, this could be where the motel was. He remembered hearing planes overhead in his room. But his self-appointed guide moved confidently toward an elevator, and Cecilio hurried to catch up with him. In silence, they rode to a lighted area on the first floor. Cecilio followed his rescuer through the long terminal and outside across 4 lanes of traffic. Finally, briskly approaching the last lane, the man pointed. "You see that red van? That van will take you where you need to go." Somehow, Cecilio understood. He stammered his thanks and walked toward the red van. It had a motel's name written on the side, but Cecilio couldn't be sure if it was the right one. He knocked on the driver's window. "Please take me to the motel," he said. "I need to see your room key," the driver answered. Cecilio shrugged. "I don't have one." He looked around for his rescuer, but the man was nowhere to be seen. "Well, what's the name of your motel?" "I don't know," Cecilio said. His heart sank. Was he to be stranded again? The driver decided that the motel could sort out the problem. He let Cecilio sit in the rear area along with all the luggage, and drove him and the other passengers back. As they entered the parking lot, Cecilio almost cheered. This was the right place. The manager remembered him and provided another key. Cecilio took a shower and lay down to read his Bible as he waited for his friends. They were surely still looking for him, but would return eventually. As he waited, his thoughts turned to the mysterious stranger on the train. From the moment the two had met, the night had taken on a mystical quality. Why had the man spoken to Cecilio in the first place? The two had not been sitting that close to each other. Why had he assumed that Cecilio was lost? And how in heaven's name had he known how and where to lead Cecilio to the right place? In heaven's name. Cecilio smiled as he remembered the warm, safe feeling he had in the man's presence, and he realized just what God had done. He would have an even more glorious story to share with his friends in Los Fresno when he arrived safely home. Well, thank you for joining me for Stranger on the Train. I hope you've enjoyed this Once Upon a Storybook story. If you did, please be sure and hit the like button. If you're new to my channel, I would love for you to join my Joyful Creations family and hit the subscribe button and then ring the notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. And I look forward to seeing you for our next story. Until then, be safe, be joyful, stay crafty in your own way, and make your own joyful creations. Take care, everyone. Bye.